I'll just give you a, can you see my finger if I go like this? I'll just kind of give you a, a little motion like that, okay? How do you do, I don't normally do it this way. Okay, what's my opening line?
What is your opening line? What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to another video.
I hate that line. This is Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
Boy.
And they have nobody to blame but their father for who they have become. That was a poem. That was full-on poetic.
Yeah, that rhymed, didn't it?
I want to introduce you to 3 of my favorite things. This is Spencer. He's my oldest. Say hi, Spencer.
How you doing?
This is Zach. He's number 2. Say hi, Zach.
Hello.
And behind the garage, I have... She missed the signal.
I'm not doing it again.
Behind the garage, look that way.
I'm looking that way.
Behind door number 1, we have introduction number 3. This is a new project that we're all kind of excited about. 1970 Mustang Coupe. I'll call this a garage find because it's been sitting there for about, 10 years, and some work has been done to it. Let's take a look. Now you commentate.
You just let him get around. See how it has red on it. Should I get the hood or something?
Yeah, you can open the hood from the front, Spence.
Oh, it did not have a hood lock.
Part of the fun for this car is that half the engine is in the front and half the engine is in the back.
You average it out, it's a mid-engine.
A new design for mid-engines. That's a 302 with, the pistons are still in it. But that's about it. And it looks, I'd say generally pretty clean, but hard to know what you got until you have a chance to run it. And since I bought it this way, I really don't know what it's been doing. But it is really pretty clean. And the exterior needs some work. The interior is perhaps the most interesting part of the whole thing. To pick up a car that's already that clean on the inside seems pretty unique to me. It's got a pretty decent set of aftermarket wheels on it that I like pretty well, and hopefully the key opens the trunk because that's where the rest of the engine is. How about that? In the box. Oh, it comes with a scoop.
No, what did you do with the bobblehead Jesus that was in there?
Oh, bobblehead Jesus didn't make it. It was a Mexican Jesus.
It was a bobblehead Mexican Jesus.
So there's that bag is full of push rods. It has a pretty weeny intake on it. Look at this, Zach.
Two-barrel.
Hold on to that for me, Spence.
Yeah.
Oh, talk us through the amazing powerhouse that is the whatever that is.
So more air equals more fuel equals more power equals more better. Well, this one's only got 2 holes, where a good carburetor has 4 holes.
So that carburetor pretty much is a paperweight. And the intake manifold in there along with it is a heavy paperweight. That's all cast iron. Supposedly,
iron intake?
It's cast iron intake. That's stock.
That's lame.
Supposedly the engine is complete. The radiator is down here, and the heads with cast number D0OE 302 right there with cast number D0OE, which frankly I've read pretty good things about. There are some really lousy heads out there from Ford, but these are not lousy. But that's one of the things we got to talk about. So, Zach.
Yeah.
What does a guy do with a car like this? You got a fresh slate 302. What do you do?
You pick up all the ladies in the block. That's what you do with it.
that's assuming you can get the 302 to run. Question is, how do you build out the 302? The big craze right now, in Chevy land, we do what's called an LS swap. What's an LS swap, Spencer?
Something basics do when they want easy power.
Cheater.
Right.
Yeah, an LS is a modern V8 Chevy engine. Okay? So in Chevy land, they'll drop...
It's a cheat code.
They drop an LS engine into an old, truck or car or something. Some people actually talk about putting an LS in the Mustang, which is, in my view, heresy.
Cross-contamination.
But what is common now is to take a Coyote engine, which is kind of the equivalent. That's the new Mustang engine, also a 5-liter, and put the Coyote engine in here.
For
Which
all you Mustang bros out there.
is really interesting because then you get an engine that's high performance, high reliability, sounds great. It just loses the old school appeal. It has a few other problems. Number one is the Coyote is expensive. So to buy a Coyote new, I mean, you're pushing probably 10, 15 grand just for the motor. And if you put a Coyote in here, you don't reuse that 3-speed automatic transmission. You put something else in it, and if you're going to go that far, I'd put a manual in it and put a clutch.
Boy.
So now you need a transmission. That's another $7,000-8,000.
'Cause money's no object.
If you find one off of a wrecked car, you can do a lot better. So you could find the combo for, maybe $9 for the 2 pieces. But then you got to cut out the shock towers because the Coyote engine is too big for it to fit in there. And you pretty well need to redo the suspension anyway, because if you've got an engine like that in a car with old crappy suspension, it's a death trap. So the Coyote swap is interesting, but I don't think I really want to take it this far, or I don't think I want to go that far with it. If I had a 68 fastback, yeah, maybe you think about that. 70 coupe, I actually like, in 1969 and 70, I actually like the look of the coupe better than the fastback, but the market value isn't there. So you drop 20, 30 grand into the car and it wouldn't be worth that much when you're done. So that's the one extreme, okay? Here's the other extreme. You take all the parts we got and put it back together. See if it starts. 2-barrel carburetor and all.
What is with you and your extremes?
You'd have it running for... Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Is you paint the logical extremes when you make any decision?
I mean, I guess.
You don't sound very enthused about that extreme.
I don't like either of those extremes.
Those are the extremes. I'd like to land somewhere in the middle. So, here's the question. I think the base level option is the engine as it is, rebuilt, right? You take the engine out, you get it a hot bath, you check, see if it needs to be bored, check, see if the crank needs to be ground, and then you assemble it with new lifters, new push rods.
Rings, mains.
Yep, new pistons, new mains, and probably reuse the existing heads. You have them checked out by the machine shop as well, but definitely a new intake manifold, probably a, dual plane, maybe an Edelbrock air gap intake manifold.
Something cool.
With a 4-barrel carburetor. And I think you could do all that for about $3 grand. And then, right, you're in the car pretty reasonably, and while the engine's out, you clean up the engine bay, take all the old stuff out, maybe give it a little bit of sanding and some fresh black paint, and you've got something pretty reasonable. It's drivable, and then you can start focusing on the body work. That's one option. The other option is very much the same. You pull the engine, rebuild the bottom part of it, but then you go buy a set of aluminum heads. You don't seem to like that idea.
What gave you that impression?
Well, because you went and cringed a little bit with your head when I said
It
aluminum
wasn't
heads.
a cringe. That was a
Oh,
Even thought.
that was a thought moment.
I don't know if it'd be worth its time. What are the horsepower differences?
Well, from what I've read, you can get 400-ish horsepower with the right combination. Versus this car off the factory floor was rated, this is the 2V engine, not the Boss, was rated at 225 horsepower. That car behind you, that Jaguar F-Pace, is rated at 380
But you won't look cool
with a
that.
supercharged V6. So if you had, if you could approach the 350 range, this car's lighter than the Jag, so if you could approach the 350 range, I think this would feel kind of like the Jag. So I've been targeting, I'd like to have 300 minimum,
You think
400 's a
you'd
bit
get
of a
that with the old
stretch.
heads?
I think the old heads will push low threes. If we did the intake manifold, had the heads worked, did a
Cams.
4-barrel carburetor and the right cam, okay? The trick flow heads that I found
Yeah.
they require this combination involves it involves a roller cam as opposed to a flat tappet cam.
Those were the $80 a piece ones, right?
Well, the lifter, yeah, you have to replace the lifters and you do a retrofit hydraulic roller lifter, and they're not cheap. So that adds up, but it gives you a smoother flow. You don't have to worry about flattening out lobes on cams. You just spend more money doing it. and then the trick flow heads are not cheap. They're probably in the neighborhood of $1,000 to $1,200 a piece. So if you go that route, you're probably putting $7,000 into the engine. But you'd be approaching maybe that 400 horsepower range. That would ideally involve also swapping out the exhaust manifold for some exhaust headers. It looks like it's only got a 2-inch exhaust. Is that 2 or 2 1/4?
You think I can tell? I don't know.
So you'd probably need to run 2.5-inch exhaust all the way out. All of these options involve pulling the engine out and getting it redone. Let's start with that. We'll take it into the machine shop, have them look it over. Look, if they find the crank's bad, for example, you probably stroke the thing. You do a 331 or a 347 stroker. But assuming the crank's good and it can be ground smooth and they can just give the engine a bath, maybe bore it out, probably 30 thousandths over, there is a little bit of a palpable ridge right here at the top of the cylinder.
These things been run?
Quite, yeah.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, there's definitely some need for some cleanup there. Did you feel that, Zach? You see what I'm talking about?
Is it just dirt?
That's the end
Or
of
is
the
it-
piston travel.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
where it's worn out the cylinder.
The ring is just
That's interesting.
barely down below the top surface of the piston.
Yeah, I can feel that. There's like a
That's-
bump right there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
If
that's
you can
how high the
feel it, that's
piston
bad.
ring, the top ring goes.
Wait, so why is that a problem? Because if that's that's as high as it's gonna go anyway, right?
It just demonstrates wear.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That means that the cylinder has worn that much. And so when they bore it out, they'll typically bore it to all that being the same. There are a host of other variables like piston shape. If you get a bit of a domed piston, then you get higher compression versus a concave piston where you get lower compression. I don't think I want to get too high though. I don't want to have to run high grade gas in it. Certainly don't want to have to put like octane booster or av gas in it. So
Where are we gonna
something,
get av gas?
what if we ended up in the 10-to-1 ratio? I think that'd be good. And up high elevation like this, 10-to-1's fine on
We got the high altitude exemption.
general pump gas. So, well, all right. Let's take this, wheel it out of here, push it back into the shop, get it up a little bit where we can get underneath it to unhook the torque converter, drop the bell housing bolts, we'll pull the hood off and hook up to the hoist and lift that thing out of there, shall we? While we push this thing back into the shop, help me out. Am I headed the right direction with this car? Do I go all in and put a modern motor and transmission in it? Or do I keep the old 302? And if I keep the old 302, do I continue to use the stock heads? Obviously, they'll be checked out and worked over to make sure that they're clean and ready. But is that worth it? Or do I go to a set of aluminum heads? Recognizing that there may be some problems with aluminum on cast and the head gaskets, and it doesn't maintain that stock type of an old feel, but you get more power, you don't have to pay to fix old heads, and you get some kind of cool aluminum resonance in the exhaust tone. So I like that, not to mention a little higher compression ratio on the fuel before you have detonation problems. So there's a host of benefits there, I get it. Is it worth the extra money to retrofit the cam to a roller lifter? Do I need to think about doing the suspension? Even though, I mean, what I'd prefer to do is get it running and then think about other upgrades like the Shelby drop and the suspension and the bodywork and everything else that can come later. It needs disc brakes, by the way. I didn't mention that. The front still has the original drum brakes. So we have a lot of work. We're going to go ahead and take the engine out. Tune in next week to see that operation. And then let me know what you think we should be doing with this car. Have I got it right, or am I missing something that I need to think about a little more? Recognize that the planned use of the car is more daily driver than it is hot rod or race. It is expected to have an educational element as well, mostly for Zach. Spencer's actually a trained diesel mechanic and does it full time. This is a bit of a new thing for Zach, so I want him to get some exposure, and I'm thinking that rebuilding this motor might be the best way to do that. Let me know. What should we be doing here? Keep me on the straight and narrow. This is my first Mustang ever. I'm excited for it. We've always liked them, and I want to see what we can do with it, but I want to do it right. I also expect this to be what some would dub a budget build. So no crazy ludicrous ideas. That probably rules out the Coyote. See you next week.